Welcome to another edition of Turnbuckle Talk on the Turnbuckle Bros podcast. All right, welcome everybody once again to another edition of Turnbuckle Talk on the Turnbuckle Bros podcast. I am your host, Matt Hewitt. Alongside me, as always, the Blue Chipper, the Day Tripper, the Lime Ripper, the king of all things baseball, my brother, Steve Mutsu. And Steve, since we started this podcast, I'm a professional wrestling guy, historian through and through. You're a baseball historian through and through. And I think today we have the most ultimate, perfect guest on our show. We have Mr. Ed Wheatley, award-winning author, Emmy Award-winning producer, and the author of the upcoming book coming out, which is available for pre-order right now on stlwrestlingbook.com. We have Mr. Ed Wheatley with us today. Ed, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and welcome to Turnbuckle Bros.
Glad to be here. Glad to talk through all those subjects.
All right. And you know what? Man, I mean, a wrestling and baseball guest, Steve. Like, can you believe we've actually done this?
No, I cannot.
Oh, man. And so, like, this is our bread and butter, and Ed has been gracious enough to give us his time today, and we have a hell of an interview for you all. So basically, Ed is literally an award-winning filmmaker. He has produced documentaries on the St. Louis Browns for PBS, which I believe won an Emmy Award back in 2020. He's written several books about the Browns, about baseball in St. Louis, the Cardinals, that are critically acclaimed all across the board. And so basically, let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit of wrestling first, Ed. Wrestling at the Chase, the book, coming out October 1st. How did this come to be? And we are excited to get our copies here very soon.
Yeah, you know, we can't forget history. And the other thing is you learn by it and you see how the times were. But more than anything, right now in these times, to be able to go back to those happy times of life that really occurred in the 50s and 60s, you know, it was a simpler life. It was a life where you had generally one television. It was this big hunk of wood with a real tiny screen.
We had
rabbit ears on the top, but everybody would gather. They would bond. And, you know, that's how I really am kind of a sports historian and go through all this. You know, that's what we did with the baseball histories and the Negro League histories that I'm working on right now. And, you know, it was a time where the Negro League Museum in Kansas City and Cooperstown were closed. So I had lost a lot of access to the projects, and we were working on another PBS film, and we had to shut that down temporarily as well. So I happened to just be sitting here, and you know, we had a lot of popularity with our last book, Baseball in St. Louis, which was picked as one of the top 25 books of 2020, and then that was on top of the Browns book, which was picked as the best book published in baseball in 2017. And just a month or two ago, we were fortunate to, I've had two books on this committee that looked at the 100 best baseball books ever published. So it's like, you know,
wow,
it's very humbling to talk about. It's, you know, it's a lot of hard work, but just to talk about it. Then, you know, we just won the Emmy. So I was getting a lot of offers to would I write this book, would I do that? And, you know, it was brought to me about wrestling at the Chase. And, you know, my books are these award-winning coffee table books loaded with about 400 or 500 pictures. That's what I like. I want to take people back in time through pictures as well as my words. And plus, the pictures can tell you a lot more sometimes than the words. And getting pictures has gotten difficult because there are companies like Getty Images buying them up, and, you know, they want to sell them for $500 to, you know, sometimes $5,000 to use, and you can't do that. So I was kind of like, as I was approached about wrestling at the Chase, how do you do this? I can't get the things I need. Whereas my contacts in baseball, I can. And it was Herb Simmons, you know, graciously said, all Sam Muchnick stuff was passed to Larry Matysek, and Larry Matysek licensed it to him, and it's all mine to use. So I called Bob Costas, who had some involvement, I know, here in St. Louis at the time of wrestling and relationship with Sam, and he said, "Do it." We had a long multi-talk several times. I talked to the Muchnick family, and they said, "Please do it." The Garagiola family of Mickey and Joe, "Please do it." And the Coppola family, who owned not only the hotel where it happened, but the television station, and it was like, "Please do it." And here's all our archives. So
Wow.
I thought it was the perfect storm, amid this shutdown of all these virus things, and my house was loaded up with all kinds of things from ever, and we dove into it. Like I said, I remember sitting with my grandmother watching it, and all of a sudden, everybody had their stories. Those 4 words, wrestling at the Chase, they immediately push all these memories, and people smile as they think fondly of watching this, whether it's with their grandmother. And so many of them are with their grandparents, or, like 2 brothers watching it and, taking the moves they just saw Dick the Bruiser put on Cowboy Bob Ellis and repeat that in some house living room and break all the chairs and tables and windows. Yeah, we're going. So it was one of these things. It was just, like I said, a perfect storm how it came together. And, ever since the word snuck out in the newspaper that we were working on this, it's just been, everybody has stories and cooperating. And in fact, like the films that we showed were created for the PBS network that, won the Emmy Award. We are in the midst of making a film based on this wrestling book. I mean, the book is an outstanding. I mean, it's going to be a 11-inch by 11-inch. This is just a prototype of several pages, but I get into all the different pages and all these vignettes. This over here is the letter Muchnick sent to Luthez saying, "I'm going to create this show, and here's what it is." And actually down there, that reel of tape is Joe Garagiola's from the early shows, But I love loading them up with pictures and, taking people back in time. And, even got over in here, Dick the Bruiser. There he is right smack in the middle when he played for the Green Bay Packers. So
yes,
you got hundreds of pages that look like that. So it's we need good thoughts at this time. I mean, we got enough crap everywhere you turn. You give people these historical books, take them back in time when they were young, sitting rooting for the Browns, or sitting ringside. And there is so much about this this wrestling at the Chase story. I mean, Joe Garagiola lived just about a mile and a half, 2 miles down the road up on the hill off Kings Highway. And, he talked about as a young child, him and his brothers and sisters, they would be riding back and forth on Kings Highway in front of the Chase. Chase was the most opulent hotel in St. Louis. And the Chase Club was where, that was the place. Everybody dressed to the nines,
Oh, yeah.
It was one of the top 5 nightclubs in the country, and I have programs signed by Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Rosemary Clooney, and all these people who performed there. I bought those when I was collecting some baseball memorabilia was in the package, because there was a guy who worked there as a busboy, and he would always get all those guys autographed, but he would also every morning send down the daily menu and get it signed by all of the baseball teams that stayed at the Chase.
Oh.
So who knew 2 years ago when I bought these things, what was I going to do with them? And they are in the book. But
that is awesome.
But Garagiola family would talk. Wouldn't it be so nice one day we could win the lottery and we could go to the Chase? Well, the Chase, as I said, was opulent. The who's who, kings, queens, presidents, Major League Baseball players, all the stars who performed at the Muni Opera across the street in Forest Park stayed there. And when wrestling at the Chase first started, you go back and watch those films, how everybody's dressed to the nines. You got women in evening gloves sitting ringside. As Joe Garagiola called them, closet wrestling fans, because they came out because now they wanted to be seen on the hottest ticket in mid-America.
Of course.
And it was that is this draw. But at the same time, all these people, like Garagiola's family would talk about, they could never go in there. But all of a sudden, once Harold Koppler put Channel 11, KPLR TV on the air, everybody was an equal. It was the great unifier, because the swells were sitting ringside and everybody else had a better seat on their own couch through Channel 11. And it really brought a city, a community together.
Oh, I mean, truer words have never been spoken. I mean, as far as wrestling at the Chase goes, I mean, those four words, just like you said earlier, have been synonymous in me and Steve's lives. I mean, our entire lives. That's why we were so excited to talk about this because, I mean, from the time, from my first, some of my earliest memories are sitting in front of a old wooden TV that sat on the floor, just like you said.
Yeah.
Every Sunday morning.
I mean, you know, we have talked about wrestling at the Chase our entire lives.
Well, and it is. It was such an institution because, you know, there wasn't other forms of entertainment. You know, St. Louis was the wrestling capital of the world because of Sam Mechnick, his ties here with his wrestling club. He controlled everything. So all eyes, St. Louis, as I said, wrestling capital of the world during the golden years of wrestling, the late 40s all the way to 1983. And, you know, we had it special. And, you know, you can't take that away. It's history, but yet you don't want to forget it. And that's what I'm just trying to do.
And that is what you're doing. And, you know, you showed us a little sneak peek of the book, and I literally cannot wait to get my hands on this thing.
In that little sneak peek, I saw Hulk Hogan. Did he ever make an appearance on Wrestling at the Chase?
Right. Well, you're going to have to tell me because in the back of the book, I have true or false type questions, you know, fact or fiction. And, you know, there's one in there about Hulk Hogan. And, you know,
I didn't think he did, but I saw him on that picture, so I wasn't sure.
I know the answer to that question.
Well,
what's the answer?
The answer to that question would be no. The answer would be no.
Well, it's a sort of answer on Hulk Hogan. He didn't, you know, when Sam Muchnick retired in '83 and Vince McMahon bought the program for a couple of years, and that's when Hulk Hogan came at the Chase and wrestled.
Right.
So he
did
WWF, but it was not under Muchnick. It was under the few years that Vince McMahon tried to keep the program alive.
Yes, they did predominantly a lot of their TV there for those couple of years where traditionally they were recording their TVs out of, I believe, like Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Is where they would do a lot of their TVs. And then after they bought the rights to the Chase, they actually WWF would have wrestling at the Chase.
Right.
But it's not the real wrestling at the Chase.
And at the same time, Larry Matisek and Mickey Gargiola moved over to Channel 30. So there was this competing wrestling matches in St. Louis. So there, you know, that year and a half is a very sticky year to talk about because, you know, Sam had retired. Larry was trying to carry that torch. Some of the wrestlers went with him. Some stayed with the St. Louis Wrestling Club. But you know, it was one of those things that I look at wrestling in let's call it period pieces. Up until 1904, you know, wrestling goes back to the cavemen. You can find cave drawings of men wrestling. You go into Egyptian pyramids and there's these paintings of wrestlers. You go into Babylonia and there's the mosaics with wrestling. And you can find wrestling in the Quran and you can find wrestling in the Bible. Go to Genesis, I think it's 33. Isaiah has a piece wrestling. So it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. But it was always the Greco-Roman type. Then that was made famous through the Greeks and the Romans. You know, it's kind of almost like samurai wrestling, you know?
Yeah.
1904 Olympics, the first time freestyle wrestling was performed and allowed. And by the way, where did that happen?
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Right across the street in Forest Park was where the Olympics at Washington University. It happened in the park across the street from the Chase Park Plaza. I mean, when I dug that one up, it was like, holy crap, how ironic is this? And at the same time, you know, we're headed to World War I. And coming out of World War I, vaudeville was born in the roaring 20s. This action. We don't want to see two behemoth guys wrestling. I talk about a wrestling match down at South Broadway Athletic Association. People went home and had dinner and came back and they were still stuck in, you know, their scrum. But in the 20s, people wanted speed. They wanted activities. You know, the society of the Roaring '20s was coming into the cities, and you know, before they would just travel around the country. So this freestyle wrestling happened, and you had all these territories evolving across the country. There was like mainly 32 territories, and in the late 40s, they formed the NWA. With Sam was not the first. For the first year, it was Toots Monday, I believe, and then Sam took over for the next almost 30 years, and he made it into special. And they moved wrestlers between territories. It was agreement, you know, and the champion would go to all the territories, because in the past you had like 32 champions and they just all wrestled in their territory. Now you had talent moving around the country, and it was all done here from St. Louis. And then, you know, that was the golden years, you know, with the wrestling at the Chase, and you know, these big athletes and these stars. And then in the 80s, the world changed again. All of a sudden, you know, there's computers, there's video games, you know, all the action of the 80s and the cycles, pay-per-view, cable TV. And Sam was not in that, really. What he was in was wrestling at the Chase, this professionalism. Vince McMahon's father had been one of the promoters in one of these territories up in the Northeast. He took over, and Vince grabbed all the cable TV, pay-per-view, and the, you know, also the style of video games that people wanted to see on television. That's where then it was a transition from Sam to Vince to what we have today. So it was all, you know, this historic. And in those first several years of wrestling at the Chase, you know, it was Lou Thesz, Pat O'Connor, you know, those glory guys of the 40s and 50s. And then it transitioned to guys like Dick the Bruiser, Cowboy Bob Ellis, you know, Eduardo Carpentier, and all these different players you name. And then towards the end, the third period is, you know, really two men, Ric Flair and King Kong Brody. You know, they were the top billers. And, you know, and I don't mean to leave out any of the wrestlers. I'm just trying to keep it sharp. But there's really three different trends in wrestling.
What are some of the greatest moments in wrestling at the Chase? I know mine is when I watched Harley Race fight that David Von Erich and the claw finish with the blood everywhere. That was my favorite match I ever saw. I was losing my mind watching that. What are some other popular matches?
Well, there are, you know, whenever Dick the Bruiser that was there, that was always popular because you didn't know what he was going to do. You know, he goes down, jumps down on the out of the ropes. You know, that was one of the muchness. You don't go out of the ropes. You know, you don't mess with the referee. You know, he had this whole set of rules, but you know, the good guys could get away with it. You know, Bruiser would go down there, take somebody's beer, pour it over his head, or you know, take someone's bratwurst and eat it, and go back in the ring. You know, probably one of the neatest tales, and there's a million tales about Mickey Garagiola.
Oh yeah.
Oh, a million tales, and the book is full of them. And if we have time, we'll tell one or two. But one of the ones was Mickey's gaff. I put in the book where
I know already.
Where Harley Race and them are fighting the wrestling, and it was a tag team match going on, and Mickey gets all excited. He can't stop, and all of a sudden, you know, Race is pinned, and Mickey goes running out there, the new world champion, and Harley's, you can't, no.
Ted DiBiase.
It was Ted DiBiase. You took. I was trying to say the surprise. You know, Ted DiBiase is the new heavyweight champion of the world. He defeated the champion, and it's like, no, you know, Race is on his knees screaming, no, it can't be. The coolness of Larry Matysek prevailed, but you know, we always call that Mickey's gaff. But I mean, all of these guys, I think everybody who rooted. I mean, we got stories of, you know, people's grandma. I got one story in there. This gentleman was from the Hill. His grandmother came over. She was 90 years old. He spoke little English, but she loved that show. So Saturday nights, she lived with him. She had her own TV in her bedroom. She would go into her bedroom and watch the matches because she didn't want to be disturbed by the kids or, you know, the parents. And you'd hear her in the bedroom screaming in Italian, you know, whatever. And every once in a while, go check on your grandma. You know, he opens the door and she's down on all four knees counting with the referee out. A 90-year-old lady. I mean, that is the stories. And it didn't matter who it was. It was that it was on, and you were ringside through the television. And I mean, each one had these special moves. And I got a section in the book, little trivia section in the book. This one is match the moves to the wrestler. Like
Ooh.
Baron von Raschke, I am programmed to defeat you, and all this stuff. And a lot of these wrestlers did provide me inputs with a questionnaire I sent out to them. And
Oh,
it
wow.
was just always uh, St. Louis was the place to be. If you want
Yeah.
to make it, you got to be in St. Louis, and you got to follow Sam's rules. Because
Yep.
Sam wanted it to be so authentic, and these guys were tremendous athletes. Most of them had played college football and had offers, or actually did play in the NFL. And we talked about Dick the Bruiser a moment ago, and their histories are amazing. And it's just it's kind of a void now. But the stories, we had to go to early church so we could be back in time to watch wrestling at the Chase.
Oh,
My
yeah.
dad wanted to, whatever the story. But there are just life focused around this TV program. And you've got to remember, we only had 3 stations before KPLR became the 4th. You didn't have hundreds like now. And the entertainment was not, people did not go out to eat. They didn't go to all these different things in the 50s and 60s. It was a different society. And a lot of it did revolve around Saturday nights and Sunday mornings.
Oh, one question that I kind of came up with you for a minute ago, Ed, is that, over the years of me just obsessing with wrestling and the history of it, dating all the way back to the early 1900s to now, back in the days
Right.
of like Frank Gotch and George Hackenschmidt, up until guys that are the champion now. I've heard so many wrestlers like Harley Race and Ric Flair and Ted DiBiase say in countless interviews that I've found over the years that basically, if you were the NWA champion and you were in the main event at the Checker Dome or at the Keel, that was the absolute highest you could possibly be as a wrestler. I mean, you were probably going to get your best payday that day. And if you were in the main event as the NWA champion in St. Louis, that was the top of the mountain. You could get no bigger than that. So I was going to ask you, do you chronicle a lot of these great, classic NWA champions?
Oh yeah, we do. I mean, the book has what I really sell the book, out. My thought originally was wrestling at the Chase sits on a stool that is supported by 3 legs. One leg of the stool is the Koppler family, starting with Sam Koppler and then Harold Koppler, and then Sam. He built so many things around. He built the Park Plaza next to the Chase, and he bought the Chase. All those big homes and hotels and things all around Forest Park, he built. He built the Powell Hall, the old St. Louis Theater where the symphony plays today. He built that in the 20s as a vaudeville theater. Then he made it a movie theater, and now it's the Powell Hall. So it's the setting. So one leg is the Koppler family. The second leg is the Koppler KPLR TV and how it came. At a time, there was only 3 stations, as I spoke early. At the time, KSD Channel 5 was the first station. There was only 4 TV sets when it came on the air. You see the old crowds from, like, an American Graffiti or whatever. They're all in the storefront windows watching TV. That's how it really was until people started buying it. And in actuality, I go into the history of television, televised wrestling, that Channel 5 actually had live matches earlier in the 50s, and it was filmed at the St. Louis house down at Jefferson and Shoto. And it lasted several years, and Stag Beer was their promoter. They pulled the promotions, and it went off the air for about 5 years until Harold Koppler and Sam Muchnick were on a plane, and they got talking. I got this product, and you got this vehicle to take it into homes. And that's how they made the deal, on a little napkin on an airplane. So one leg is the opulent location. Guys like Lou Thez, we would wrestle in pretty dank arenas sometimes, and here we are under these brilliant chandeliers, which probably tomorrow night is going to be the Vail Profit Ball or some big social event in this room, and now we got a ring surrounded by about 900 people. How is that? And then the third leg of the stool is, of course, Sam Muchnick and all the great wrestlers. And I give bio and sketch and different things about all the great wrestlers who took place there. Because, I mean, it all was supported by those three legs.
Yeah, and, I can remember it's been probably about close to 20 years or so now when Larry and Herb, and by the way, Herb, I know you're watching. Thank you so much for setting us up with Ed with the interview. Hope everything's going good out of Cauliflower Alley, and we love you. So I just want to say hi to Herb real quick there because he's amazing. But Herb and Larry put out this 12 disc, basically a 12 DVD set,
right?
Classic St. Louis Wrestling at the Chase. And
Right.
I remember when it came out, it's probably, I want to say, Herb, don't hold me this, about 18, 20 years ago, maybe 2002-ish, 3-ish, somewhere around in there. And I saw this and I was like, oh my, I have to have this. And it's basically probably almost all of the known footage left. And I remember, they started, from the early days on out and seeing those crowds, the upscale people, everybody's coat and tie, tables, eating a filet, eating a nice steak dinner and watching all this great wrestling going on there. I encourage anybody out there to please find that Classic St. Louis Wrestling Volumes 1 through 12. You'll see exactly what Ed is talking about on here. I have mine sitting about 3 feet from me right now, and I watch them all the time to this day.
And we're going to have a lot of those with us when we go around doing book signings and book events and different wrestling matches that we are setting up and we'll soon be announcing.
Yeah, well, tell us a few of those. Let our fans know a few of these places. One thing I was going to ask you: Are you going to be at? You're going to be at the October 30th event, right?
Yes.
Ed.
No, the book comes out October 1st, and October 6th we're going to be at Left Bank Books, which is just around the corner from the Chase on Euclid. Cowboy Bob Orton's going to be there with us.
Oh wow!
And we'll have a nice talk about the remembrances. The next night. And and by the way, that is open to the public. And you go to Left Bank Books and sign up and get all the information. The next night, October 7th, we had a kickoff coming for the book release, and the MAC came into me and said, "Can we have it there, please?" So we're having at the MAC, and Ric Flair's coming to be a part of that program with some matches with. Herb's wrestlers. The only thing about that is it was sold out in like less than an hour. But
of course,
the Bank book is not. Then we've got several others. We're out, a different book. Pretty much every bookstore in St. Louis will be signing and having events. October 9th, we're doing Herb does a wrestling benefit over at Swansea in the Swansea Firehouse. And then he's got his big event on October 30th with many of the legends, and we will be there with the books in hand. And we've got a couple little ones that it's just too early. It's not all finalized, so I don't want to get people's help. But we got one really special thing coming.
Awesome.
Later this winter, around the first week of December.
And Turnbuckle Bros, me and Steve will be at the October 30th.
Yes, we will.
Ringside. Well, we are good. We've already got our ringside table all ready to go. We're going to be there looking to meet a lot of the fans, and we look forward to meeting you there as well. And
well, that night, I don't have it with me upstairs here in my office. It's downstairs, so that I've used it when we were at that NWA event 2 weeks ago. I've got the original bell.
Yes.
That was used all the time.
Nice.
White bell you see next to Mickey. And when I was at the Fan Fest, table pre-selling the books, I think everybody was at a sign. This is the bell that was always rung. Everybody wanted to ring it.
Oh, of course. I want to ring it.
I want to ring it.
I know.
It's got this unique pitch that you just remember as a kid. And, it was so special to bring that and to have that. It's only been out of KPLR studios twice. Once, I was told, when they moved from down to Central West End out to Maryland Heights when they built their new studio, and then the other time is when it was brought over here. So it's going to be, those kind of special moments. We got a lot of things to show people and talk. Um, we hope to have this event. I said it's a little premature to talk about with some of the men who actually wrestled at the Chase. Now, Bob Orton did, and
Oh, yeah.
he with the first night. But the other thing of it is, his dad wrestled on the first program back in 1959.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Cowboy Bob Orton Sr. or Bob Orton Sr.
So those are the kind of things, and that's what, this thing of memories. As we've been putting together, I filmed Larry's wife last week for the documentary. It's one of the unique threads that goes throughout this whole story of Wrestling Chase is Ruthie. And you're going to remember Ruthie. I think it was soon as she had a red beehive hairdo, and she would get there, so early so she could always get her ringside seat. And she had that plastic chicken she would bang on the wrestling matches. And everybody thought she was part of the program. No, she wasn't. She was just some wild fan having a good time.
Is she the lady that runs up to the ring during the Harley race?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's her. Yeah, I remember her.
She went through everybody's. I mean, Dick Murdoch hated her and kept, sit down, you what, she was having direct impact interaction with the wrestlers themselves.
Yeah, when we saw that you guys were at the NWA 73 event down there at Chase Plaza just a few weeks back. This is what we mentioned to Herb, and he told us about the bell and stuff. And I said to him, "Oh man, I was so disappointed that I couldn't make it that weekend. I wanted to be there because I want to ring that bell. I want my picture with it so bad. So
you'll have
that's going to be there the 30th. I'm going to be probably going to be the first guy there. And
you'll get a picture, and we'll take a video so you can take it home with the ring-a-ding.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without question. And we're hoping to, obviously we're going to be there and hoping to have a couple of conversations with some of the legends there.
Yeah.
So for the podcast as well. Please, everybody, visit stlwrestlingbook.com. Pre-order the Wrestling at the Chase, amazing coffee table book by Ed Wheatley. It's available everywhere else October 1st. Please grab this book because this is a piece of wrestling history that any wrestling fan, anyone who calls themselves a true wrestling fan, you will have to have this book in your collection to keep calling yourself.
It's one of those things you always, as an author, you just don't, is it gonna sell? Is it what people want? And I've shown multiple people copies of it that went to the printers, and everybody's coming like, oh my gosh. I mean, Channel 9, the PBS, we got to do this film. My Browns film that was made off the Browns book, it set the all-time viewership record in pledge giving, and we're projecting that this is going to blow those records away.
Wow.
Just pretty confident that this is a story. It's like anywhere I go lately, people recognize me, partly just because of being on TV a lot, but they want to come tell the story. For years it was, I want to stop you and tell you a story about watching the Browns. I don't even have the book out or the movie out yet, and everybody's coming. I want to tell you my story of wrestling.
I'm sitting here right now wanting to tell you my Brown story. I can't wait to tell you my Brown story.
Well, we'll get it. Yeah, anytime. But I think it just tells you people are itching for a book like this. And
yes.
People are going to say, well, Larry wrote a book. Yes, he did.
He did.
About 10 years, 12 years ago. And, it was his memories, but it was mainly words. It didn't have quite the pictures and the interactions of what, this is. I try to find the right picture, and then I find the history of the anecdote, or I'll read an anecdote in a story, I'll write it, and then I go find pictures to support it. But it was such an amazing thing that was a part of everybody's lives. It was kids on Monday talking to their class. Did you see last night? Did you see Cowboy Bob Ellis? It was all of that. Everybody had their favorite, good or bad, face it, or heel. They had a guy, and that's who they wanted to be. And,
I know my dad right now, when he's watching this, Cowboy Bob Ellis is somebody my dad used to talk about.
Oh, he's in the book, buddy.
All the time.
And you think about it, all these women dressed to the nines, and the men as well, their evening gloves. they're getting sprayed on with spit, sweat,
man.
because they wanted to be ringside. The guy who calls his girlfriend up and says, "Hey, I got tickets, the hottest ticket in town. We're going to the Chase. Get dressed, I'll be by." So here she comes, picks him up. Sure, Frank Sinatra's in the Chase Club. Well, wait a minute, aren't we going there? No, the hottest ticket's down here in the Coruscant room. And you know what? She didn't care because that's where the place to be. The Chase is the place. And she was in the room, the Coruscant room. Just unbelievable.
Absolutely. And so I think this is a good time now, Ed. I mean, talked about wrestling at the Chase. To keep me going, I will talk about wrestling all the time. But, we specialize in both wrestling and baseball in this podcast, like I said before. And we're dying to talk some baseball with you as well.
Go for
it. So basically, you have written many, like you said earlier, great books about St. Louis baseball, Cardinals, the Browns. And what I think is amazing, too, is that you are actually the president of the St. Louis Browns Historical Society.
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome in itself. Tell us a little bit about that, and let's transition into talking some Browns baseball, because I know Steve's got a bunch of stuff for you.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns, for many people, prior to this plan I had, was a team baseball forgotten. And I say that because, there was the Brooklyn Dodgers, but they're supported by Los Angeles. And if you go out to Los Angeles, you'll find all kinds of things about the Brooklyn Dodgers. You go to Oakland, you see all the things about the Philadelphia Athletics. And if you go to Atlanta, there's stuff about the Boston Braves, the Milwaukee Braves. The Baltimore's want nothing to do with the Browns, and they've told us that. Their legacy is the minor league team that was there. And they wouldn't even sell my Browns book in their bookstore. And I get on the radio multiple times with Baltimore, and they don't know, they've never heard this. So the fan club was founded in 1984 by a gentleman named Bill Borst. And, it existed for the purpose of keeping them relevant, because people still today are diehard Browns fan. There was a lady, Gert Slama, she was in my second film. She just passed away at the age of 102. But she would go all the time as a teenager, and sometimes not even a teenager yet, because in those days you could do it. Go to the ball games and watch them over and over. And she loved the Browns. That was her team. Well, she was a baseball fan, and then, when the Browns moved, like so many other people, they reluctantly rooted for the Cardinals. And the Cardinals gave her a special award, like they did to other people, like a special fan recognition, that she's a special fan because her daughter wrote something. And when she got up there and they said, "Well, what do you think about being, one of the great fans of the Cardinals?" She goes, "It's only by default because the Browns aren't here anymore." So I heard that, and I brought her to our last luncheon several years ago and made her the all-time greatest St. Louis Browns fan. And that's how it is. These people, I give talks, guy will pull out, "Here's my Brownie Brigade card. I've been carrying in my wallet." Well, my God, it's got to be over 68 years old if it's still in your wallet. Or they'll bring my ticket from the 1944 World Series. Or, they always, this thing of the memorabilia they have for the Browns. And, we've had this, and what was happening is the leadership was transitioning, and some of them were passing on, or, physically couldn't do it anymore. And that's when I decided to retire and take playing baseball. I mean, I play about 100 baseball games a year in senior leagues across the country. And then we, run this fan club, and we have about 700 active people with the Browns. Our last two luncheons, we've had over 400 people come. 400 people sitting together at lunch because they love a team that hasn't played in 68 years. So we keep this memory alive. It was like we got our luncheon coming up November 3rd of this year. You can go to our website and find information on it. The STLBrowns is our .com is our website. And Mike Veck, Bill Veck's son, is coming. And if you've ever seen or heard anything of his everything in baseball, he's run minor league teams. He's been everywhere. He's been at the right hand of his dad. And it's good. So this was the Browns book. You know, we built. Costas did the forward for me. It did, baseball book of the year in 2017, recognition from multiple sources. I mean, and as you can see, it's filled with pictures and stories, and that's the way I think a good book should be. And we did this one here, baseball in St. Louis, talking about why is St. Louis one of the greatest baseball cities in America, and it really goes to starting at the little leagues and the Corey leagues. I know one of you played in Corey league.
I played in the Corey leagues.
And that was in all 50 states, and then it was with servicemen. It was created in countries, and it's still headquartered. It was founded in 1934, and it's still headquartered here. And then you had all the great high school teams. There was a time in the late 40s and early 50s there were more men in the major leagues from Beaumont High School than any other high school in the country.
Wow.
And, it was ironic. The story, real quick story. Beaumont was built on the site of Robeson Field where the Cardinals played, and I joke that they must have picked up something in the ashes of that because it caught on fire. It was the last wooden ballpark in the major leagues, and that's then when they had to either move out of town because they didn't have a stadium, or two, build a stadium, but they didn't have a lot of money, or three, Branch Rickey, who was now their president, he went back down the 5 blocks to Sportsman's Park and worked a deal to play in Sportsman's Park. Great story how that happened, but it was, the quick thing was, hey, you're not a good businessman because it sits empty half the year. Let us play in there. Well, all of a sudden, Branch Rickey doesn't have to pay an exorbitant price because he snookered him on that, but he doesn't have to support a building or anything. He put all his money into building the minor league dream that he wanted. And what did it do? The Cardinals, they win the pennant in 26, 28, 30, 31, 34, 42, 43, 44, and 46. So, maybe if it had stayed with the Browns where he originally was, it could have been the Browns. But I mean, there's so many great stories. The high school American Legion team, St. Louis has had some of the best American Legion teams, always competing in the final. And, the other high schools besides Beaumont, look at Lafayette right now, where David Freese, Ryan Howard, and Luke Voigt all came from there. And if before that, there was Rittner High School with Jerry Royce, Ron Hunt. It was just.
I went to Rittner.
Okay, so and the thing about that baseball in St. Louis, like you just said, I went there, and all these major league players that were on your school or on the school's get to. Example, if you played against U City as an example, you could have played against. Come to bat against Ken Holtzman or Art Shamsky in the outfield, or Rittner. You had Jerry Royce there. I mean, this is the stories that take people back to those memories, and that's like I said, it was well received. One of the top 25 books in 2020 is also one of the ones that was voted for on the top 100 baseball books of all time with the Browns. So, very humbling to think two of the books on that
Robinson Field. That was a strange looking field too. It was real short in right field, like 240 feet or something. Real short.
People go, well, how do they burn down so easy? Because the old men would just sit there smoking cigars and flicking their ashes, and that's what happened. But I said it must have been in the ash in that building that made all these great ball players, and sometimes manager because Earl Weaver went there as well. Dick Williams went there as well. So. There's all these great baseball stories.
When I was about 10, I came across a Bowman card, a St. Louis Browns card of Hank Arft. And so I was just looking at it, and I noticed that he was from St. Louis on the back of it.
Yeah.
So I looked him up in the phone book, and I called him. I'm like 10 years old. I just called him out of the blue. And his wife, Ruby, her name was Ruby, and she answered the phone. And I started talking to her for a while. Wow. And she was like, well, he's at the funeral home. Well, hey, let me give you the number to the funeral home. Why don't you call the funeral home and talk to him? So I did. So I called the funeral home, and I'm talking to Hank Arft on the phone, and he's like, why don't you bring your card down to the funeral home, and I'll sign it for you. So I don't really remember how I got to the funeral home. Maybe I took a bus or something, but here I am in the funeral home with Hank Arft, and he's telling me about the game with Eddie Goodell and when the managers, and he signed my card. Wait, I think we got it right here somewhere, don't we?
Well, I knew Hank Garf for a long time. He's buried in my churchyard. Yep, there it is.
Yep. So yeah, I went up to the funeral home. He signed my card for me and talked for a while. Back then you could just call a guy and show up at his work, and next thing you know, you're getting an autograph.
Yeah, where I grew up, 5 of the Cardinals lived in my subdivision. Mike Shannon, Dal Maxwell, Jerry Buchek. I mean, it was like,
Oh,
uh, but Hank was a friend of my dad's. They played together, and the one thing St. Louis had in the late '50s and '60s is one of the greatest semi-pro uh, baseball operations in the country, because a team of 16, 18 guys, at least a dozen of them had played professional baseball, and 2 or 3 or 4 of them had played major leagues. And Hank played on my dad's team. I was the bat boy for Hank. That's how I got to know him as a young kid. And the Schrader Funeral Home there in Baldwin.
Yep.
wow.
That is, that is the things that you'll have these personal stories. Whether it's with a wrestler or with a baseball player, and you never let it go with you. It's always there. They took the time for you.
Yeah.
Special for you.
I found this picture of you, Ed. Who are you standing with here?
To my right, the viewers left with the beard is Bill Borst. He was the first president of the Browns Club. And to my other side, that's Bill Rogers. He was the previous president of the Browns Fan Club that I took over with. So, and I had invited them to be on my book cover, help me a little with the book. And, I just felt I owed it them for what they handed off to me. And there you go.
And we definitely encourage everybody, please look up Ed Wheatley. Look up his books. I mean, it doesn't get any better, especially even if you're not necessarily a St. Louis fan, but just the stories and the history and just everything that goes in to these books. Ed has, gone to no end to put every just amazing historical fact in there. And we can't tell everybody out there enough that baseball fans alike, even if you're a Cub fan or a Reds fan or a Pirates fan, it doesn't matter. These books are just amazing.
And I think that's what, I've spoken around the country, and it's funny. You're up in Cooperstown speaking with all those Northeasterners with their Red Sox and Yankees, and they think they're so great. And you talk about the Browns, and so many people don't know. But once you give the talk, people become interested. Once they read the book, like I said, we have over 700 active people participating in the Browns fan club from all over the country. And, they have built ties and created events there for them as well. So, it was a team. Sure, they were losers. They coined the expression, first in booze, last in the American League. Their story is one with forks in the road. And it seems like every time a fork was approached, they took the wrong one and they never made it. 1922, one of the greatest teams ever, they lost by a game on the final day, winner take all with the Yankees. But George Sisler, about 15 days earlier, had hurt his shoulder, and he was only batting, over 420, he had, over 200 hits. And so he was limited those last weeks. It was just like all these little things that could have been weren't. They just didn't have the luck. They just didn't have the money. And there's reasons partly why they didn't have the money, because the one owner died, and the team was run for a few years by a bunch of lawyers, and they just didn't make good moves, but they had some of the best memories, as you said, from Eddie Goodell, grandstand manager night. There's all these tricks, and it didn't turn out. But people, they still remember, even young people who weren't even born. Why did my grandfather, father always have a Browns hat or a Browns shirt, a Browns jacket? They wanted to know about this team. And, you want a good feel-good story. I was at a charity event dinner, and everybody's standing around. This guy comes up and says, "Are you the Browns guy?" And I'm like, "I guess, yeah." He goes, "You wrote the book, didn't you?" "Yeah." And all of a sudden, his eyes start tearing up. Uh-oh. You know how you start thinking real fast. And he goes, "I've been looking for you." And I was like, "Oh, I hope you're not a hitman." But
Yeah, no kidding.
his wife comes over and did he do it? And I was like, "What did he do?" His dad was a diehard Browns fan. His dad has dementia, Alzheimer's, is in a home. And his dad just sits there and watches TV, like me TV shows, never talks. And he visits him several times a week. And he said Christmas was coming, and you never know what to give this guy because of his state. Well, he said, I gave him your Browns book thinking it might do something. And oh my God, he took that book, he started flipping pages and calling out names and telling a story even. And this has happened over a half dozen times to what I'm telling you now. And people have told me. And we started having this exchange. Like we had not talked like this in years. And it's that talking with doctors, that back memory comes back pretty quick. You're triggering them. And he says every time we go through that Browns book, because that was his dad's team, and he knows this, but yet on other days he's just totally silent. And he's there with tears, and his wife's tears about that, and me choked up. And he just said, "I want to thank you for giving me my dad back. You may not know as my son, but we're talking baseball like we used to." And that's really sums up why you do these books. Why you do the baseball history. Why you do the wrestling history, because those were good times, and they were shared, and it was special. And, I've gotten lucky getting them right on paper, and getting them to people, and those are the reactions we get.
Man, that is just, it doesn't get any better than that. I'm
No,
sure. I mean, I'm sure you as the author, I mean, that story alone right there probably makes it all worth it.
and since I've
All the
told
hard
that
work.
story, so many others have come and said this is good. So I mean, that's a good lesson to your viewers, that these people who are getting older with dementia or whatever, find things they were fond of and try to share that with them, and it'll be amazing what you can do.
And you're going to do
Well,
the same thing with the Negro Leaguers with a book on them too, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, that's the goal. Yeah, deeply working on that. And
I'm really interested in Negro Leaguers.
well, in St. Louis, people don't realize, not only did you have this special baseball with the Cardinals in the National League, the Browns in the American League, so that meant the best came here. They didn't have interleague play in those days. So you never got to see in St. Louis. If there was no Browns, you wouldn't have gotten to see Bob Feller, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, all these guys. But you got to. You saw the best. And in the Negro Leagues, if you were to look at when the Negro Leagues really were the main prominent league, like 1920 to the early 1930s, and then the Depression really crippled them, and teams started falling apart. And then they resurrected themselves some in the late 40s. In the 40s period, you hear about the Kansas City Monarchs. Uh, you know, Satchel Paige and all that. Hey, you got to see Satchel Paige pitch for the Browns too. Uh, but when you look at the glory years of the Negro Leagues there of the 20s and into the 30s, the St. Louis Stars were one of the best.
Yeah, I was telling Matt something about that today. So how like if you were to talk about hockey in St. Louis and you were who is the very best hockey player to ever play in St. Louis, you'd have to say Wayne Gretzky, even though he only played here for a long time. But if you were to say who is the very best professional baseball player to ever play in St. Louis, most people would say Stan Musial or maybe Albert Pujols, but they would be wrong. It's actually Oscar Charleston who played here only
Oh yeah,
1 year.
yeah, yeah. Oscar Charleston, yeah, that is true. I mean, I might debate you a little bit, maybe George Sisler, but Oscar Charleston was outstanding. I mean, Cool Papa Bell, you
Yeah.
know, it was they have there's five men up in Cooperstown that played on either the St. Louis Giants or St. Louis Stars. Now they were originally named the St. Louis Giants when they were founded in the early 1900s, and they changed their name to the Stars when ownership change took place.
Hmm.
And when you're driving down Highway 40, let's say you're headed towards Busch Stadium, when you see St. Louis University there, the Chavez Arena where they play basketball right there at Compton and Market, as you drive down parallel to that, there's a field there at Harris Stowe College. There's still a baseball field, and I still play on it. It's the college fields, but that is where St. Louis Stars Park was, where they played, right across the street
Oh, wow.
from uh, where St. Louis University plays basketball, and which was fascinating. I mean, the Giants first played up at Newstead and Broadway, and you can almost draw a line from the river down Grand Avenue because a core there of where uh, we talked about Robeson Field was at Van de Venner and Natural Bridge, and 5 blocks away was Sportsman's Park. See, that was the interesting in St. Louis. When the Cardinals were playing in Robeson Field, the Browns were playing Sportsman. It was 5 blocks apart. It wasn't like, Yankee Stadium was way up in the Bronx, and Brooklyn was, down almost by Coney Island. I mean, it was almost different worlds between those two. Or, in Chicago, you got the North Sider Cubs and the South Sider White Sox. But in St. Louis, they were only 5 blocks apart. And, it was just, that's what's so special about St. Louis. We've had such great, whether it's players from the Negro Leagues or, the National League, American League. And, that's the beauty of this book I put together here. And, the fun thing at the end of the book, they ask me what's the best part of this book, I call it, and this was done to pick the all-time great St. Louis team. Ooh, I better go this way. And 2 men at every position, 3 right-handed starters, 3 left-handed starters, and then a bullpen. And you talk about the hot stove league heating up. Are these the best of the best who ever played there? And it's really fun to debate, because I back my pictures by statistics, but that's the beauty of baseball. Everybody's got a view, because we had some of the greatest.
Yes, we did.
And some guys still playing today.
Yeah, Mike Trout, he's unbelievable. Ohtani. But the thing about Ohtani is with the Negro Leaguers, there was a bunch of guys doing that. Martin DeHingo, Bullet Joe Rogan, Double Duty Radcliffe, like John Donaldson, Jose Mendez. All those guys were pitching and hitting too. They were all doing it.
It was just a different game. I mean, there was not that many. I mean, you always think of Ruth. George Sisler he came into the majors as a pitcher.
Oh yeah, I did not know that. Yeah, did he actually pitch in the majors?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Branch Rickey was his coach at Michigan and brought him. And just like Ruth, he was so good. We got to find you a position to play every day. But Walter Johnson was his hero growing up. He actually beat Walter Johnson twice.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
But he, when you hit 400 as many times as he did, and how many times he had 200 hits, and that that's something else too. I always got to put caveats when I talk, because people always go, it was easier to hit in those days. Not necessarily. No. I mean, first of all, they had shine balls, spit balls, coffee balls. They doctored that thing up like crazy. It was
people putting pepper up their nose so they can do a snot ball.
Yes. It was a time where, the game was different. You went up swinging. You didn't wait and go deep in the counts. Pitchers pitched the whole game. I mean, they didn't throw a ball out every time. It was a different. It was a great experience. I mean, one of the greatest men to pitch for the Browns, and one of my favorite stories was Dizzy Dean. I'll say, with the day, Dizzy Dean was one of the Browns in the Hall of Fame. Some guy said, "Are you stupid? Dizzy Dean pitched for the Cardinals." It's like, we'll talk about who's stupid in a minute.
Please do.
Dizzy Dean was an announcer. He really lost everything when the Cardinals released him because he broke his toe.
Yeah, an All-Star game or something, right? Wasn't it?
And,
yeah.
He didn't want to take off, and he wanted to come out and show everybody he's Dizzy Dean. Well, he ruined his shoulder because he was throwing differently.
Yeah.
Cardinals released him. He bounced around a little bit with the Cubs, contributed minorly, but he finally retired because he didn't really spend that much time in the major leagues. And the Browns had they used him as a color commentator on the radio, which the teachers in St. Louis tried to get him kicked off because of the way, so-and-so sludding to third base, and then you got the kids going to school talking about sludding in third base and teachers are against him. But he was also he would say he was definitely not a homer because he'd sit up there. These Browns pitchers are terrible. My grandma could do better than them. I mean, they can't even hit the side of the barn. It's things like that. So there was this little, animosity from the players towards Dizzy. As Dizzy said, it ain't bragging if you do it.
Yep.
So he signed a one-day contract in 1947. I got the scorecard, I got the ticket stub, the pictures, and everything in the book. And what is Dizzy? He's more the rotund Dizzy. He wasn't the tall, muscular guy. He comes out that day and he throws a shutout.
Wow.
He left the game early because, in typical Dizzy fashion, he looped the ball into right field and he stretched it into a double and slid into second base, kind of wrenched his back, and he started stiffening up during the game as being an old guy, but he kept the other team in check. But his wife was sitting there right by the dugout screaming, get out of that game and get your clothes on, things like a wife could do. And he finally said, well, I got to listen to her. So he went and took a shower. But the fact is, 1947, about 14 years later, he's out there throwing a shutout. And
did his brother play for the Browns as well?
Yeah, Daffy. Paul, his brother's name was Paul, but Daffy and Dizzy. It was the same thing. Dizzy goes out and throws a one-hitter and a doubleheader. Daffy throws a no-hitter in the second game. And then Dizzy said, well, if he told me he was going to do it, I would have done it too.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the beauty of this old-time baseball and these stories that, you just can't make them up. They're real. They're there.
Man, these just like, and what I was thinking about a few minutes ago too is like, there's actually a statue of George Sisler outside of Busch Stadium.
Yes, there is.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason of that is Bill DeWitt Jr., the owner president of the Cardinals. He is one of the most generous men in baseball. He put a statue not only for George George Sisler, and he put one up for Cool Papa Bell. So he's highlighting in the midst of all his greats these two because he knows what they meant to St. Louis. Bill DeWitt Jr., his stories are fascinating. His dad was the longtime general manager, executive of the Browns, and even owned the Browns, him and his brother, for several years in the late 40s. And Billy was the bat boy for a long time during those years. So he was always out in his little uniform. Yeah. One of the best happenings with that was June 1948, where Ruth was dying, Babe Ruth. And the week before, he did that big, famous last appearance at Yankee Stadium, his farewell. And you see the picture of him from behind with his uniform on, leaning on the bat. Bob Feller gave it to him as he came walking out. And you remember that. But the final pictures and final stadium appearance took next place in St. Louis because he was doing a tour for the American Legion and Ford. And he was coming to St. Louis. And he knew he was sick. He had been doing this tour around the country. And he wanted to finish it in St. Louis with the Browns. They were playing the Yankees. And he came. And he was like, somehow he was in immaculate health that day. And then a few weeks later, he was dead. But there's this picture of Bill DeWitt and Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth standing there showing him how to bat, to hold the bat. And I wish I had that picture out for you to show. But his dad, being an executive for the Browns, told the photographer, immediately run out there, take the picture back as fast as you can. And he did because he wanted to get him signed for Bill. And if you go into Bill's office, there is this famous picture signed. But he goes into the crowd. I got pictures of him, but all these kids around him, and it was like, that was there, and he was doing it for the Belleville, Illinois, and the St. Louis Stockton American Legion teams. They were some of the top in the country, and it was just an amazing thing. And then that jersey, by the way, yes, Bill, what happened to that jersey? Because that happened to be the jersey Eddie Goodell wore.
Oh yeah,
jersey. So
I just telling Matt about that jersey a little while ago.
So he took Billy's jersey, put a number 1/8 on it, and that is what paper's falling out of the book. That's what Goodell wore to the plate, and that jersey used to be in the Hall of Fame, but it is moved now and is inside the Cardinal Hall of Fame. So
nice.
It there it is right there.
Wow.
So what happened after the game? Did you get it back, Bill? Yeah, we did, and we hung it in the front closet for a while. But I wore it for the first Halloween, and my sister wore it the next 2 Halloweens. Can you imagine this? One of the most priceless pieces of baseball memorabilia.
Yes, it is.
Was a Halloween costume.
That has to be the most priceless Browns piece of memorabilia for sure.
It is one of them.
Yeah,
there's a few things that are comparable, but I think that is the best because that is kind of tied to the legacy.
I think a good way to kind of close out the podcast today is to go ahead and tell the story and discuss that game, the Eddie Goodell game, the infamous game. So a lot of our viewers might not know what that was.
Right.
I know Steve knows a lot about it, and who better to hear it from than Ed?
I want to ask you one thing about Cool Papa Bell first, Matt, because he mentioned Cool Papa Bell.
Okay.
Do you know how fast Cool Papa Bell was?
Well, Satchel says he turned off the light switches in bed before the lights went out.
Yeah, he turned off the light and he'd be in bed before it got dark.
There was another time he said he was pitching against Cool Papa Bell, and I threw the ball, and he hit it back, and before I could turn to look at it in the outfield, he was already standing on second base. I mean, the Satchel stories are endless. But it was August 19, 1951, the 50th anniversary of the American League is taking place. And it was the 50th anniversary of Grease Dig Beer sponsoring the baseball in St. Louis. So with Bill Veeck, you never knew what was going to happen. There would be days where the game is over, and I'll count some elephants and camels and such, and you got a circus. He believed in giving you more than your money's worth. So it was these twofers. One day, the game's over, and you'd hear Sweet Georgia Brown going on the PA system, and the men come carrying out sections of a basketball court, put it together at second base, and it's the Harlem Globetrotters. So you never know what Veeck is going to do. So on this day, it's a double header, August 19, 1951. The scene is publicized that Frank Saucier, one of the greatest college and minor league ball players, is going to make a bat and make an appearance in the game. He's from the city of Washington, Missouri, just outside St. Louis. The whole town practically comes to town on these buses. Everybody wants to see Saucier play. Well, he doesn't play the first game, and he's listed on the score card as going to play in the second game. So the first game's done, and the other thing, Veeck has promoted this game is everybody who comes gets ice cream and cake, okay? Which was kind of going off on the audience. I mean, he would walk around the stadium with his wooden leg wearing shorts, had an ashtray in the wooden leg, and he would buy people, what do you need? You want a beer, popcorn, peanut, what do you want? He was there, and that's why they actually outdrew the Cardinals those years that he owned them. But anyway, the game's over.
Speaking of that, I was going to ask you a second ago, when the Yankees were in town, did the Cardinal fans fill Busch Stadium to see Babe Ruth? I mean, fill the Browns Park?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about that. If they if Babe Ruth was in town, all of a sudden you're a Browns fan.
You even sometimes you came because of the Browns, but may have been a Yankee fan, or you got to see Cleveland's great teams of the 40s with Bob Feller and those pennant winners, and I mean you got to see everybody. But between games comes this big cake. 8 men are carrying this huge cake out, and in those days it was, you think about watching TV shows how some beautiful lady pops out in a swimsuit out of the middle of a cake. People were going, "Is that going to happen?" Then they set it down. It wasn't some beautiful lady. It was a little dude, 3 feet 7 inches, wearing a Browns uniform. So the first game starts. Frank Saucier is leadoff bat, but he has to play right field. No, only Brown's leadership knew that his shoulder was bad. Because he had just joined the team a few days earlier, and he was just working him. He took too much batting practice. His hands were blistered in his shoulder. He couldn't really throw, but he's in right field. They get out of the first inning against the Tigers, and over the PA system. Now batting for Frank Sauché, Eddie Goodell, number 1/8. And everybody's going, what? Hey, there he is on our scorecard, but you know, the way Beck does, you never know what that means. He comes walking up to the plate, 3'7". He got this little tiny bat. The Tigers manager comes running out, screaming. Ed Hurley, the umpire, says, motion Zach Taylor to come out. Zach Taylor came out. Here's his major league contract. It's signed and approved. Ed Hurley says, play ball. Well, Bob Kane, standing on the mound. Bob Swift's behind the plate. How do we pitch to this guy? 3'7". He's only got a 7-inch strike zone. Well, Kane's going to ask the umpire, can I throw underhand? The guy says no. Bob Swift, the catcher, is laying down on his stomach. He says, get up. So you'll see the famous picture of him on his knees. So 4 pitches. You know, he can't hit the strike zone. He walks. And, you know, he's tipping his hat all the way down. He gets to first base. Jimmy Delsing comes running out to pinch run for him. Eddie slaps him on the butt and goes into the dugout with more fanfare. He was an actor. He'd been an actor in Chicago.
Didn't Bill Veeck tell him that if he swings, he would have a sniper out in the outfield, and if he swings, he's going to shoot?
So, yeah, it was that. So he goes into the dugout, goes into the locker room. The press comes running to him. And Bill Veeck basically kept his total secret. The only guy he told was Bob Bragg, because he said, make sure you got a cameraman tomorrow. You're going to see something interesting. But he waited to tell him that until the papers had already rolled. So they asked Eddie, well, why don't you just take one swing? Well, first of all, his bat was so short, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. He said, but, you know, and Bill Veeck was this kind of like old cuss, a Marine in World War II. He had lost his leg in World War II. Well, Mr. Veeck said, if I took a swing, there's a sniper on the roof that'll shoot me dead. And, you know, that was his mantra. And, you know, from there he left. He was kind of a surly little kid, you know, probably justifiable, you know, how people treated little people in those days. And he got into a bar fight a few years later and, you know, got beat up, and it led to him passing away. So, but I mean, you know, that's the beauty of it. And then 5 days later, he had grandstand manager night, where in one section of Sportsman's Park, the people were given a placard that said yes on one side, no on the other side. Zach Taylor, the manager, sat in his street clothes on a rocking chair on the dugout. And they were playing Connie Mack's Philadelphia A's. And they were told that a PR guy had some big signs that would ask questions like bunt, infield in, infield out, steal, all this stuff. And they're just playing along. And Hank Arf, your tail there, he comes to bat. And Hank was, you know, he was a big power hitting first baseman. He comes to bat and he walks. Well, I knew Hank Arf. He wasn't fast. He was kind of like Molina speed, you know. All of a sudden, should he steal? Yeah. Well, the Philadelphia Athletics had figured it out by this. Just watch that sign, that section. So Hank says, I got to do what they tell me to. So he takes off and he's thrown out by 25 feet. But the Browns won. So the moral of the story is maybe they should have let the fans manage the team more often. They might get wins. But the one thing I will go back, I forgot on the Eddie Goodell thing, baseball, the other owners and the commissioner got incensed with Bill Veeck, and they were wanting to get rid of him. And they, you know, that was a stunt that never happened. And if you go and look at the 1951 record book, Major League record books that are produced, you won't find Eddie Goodell in there.
Oh, yeah?
You will not find him, because the commissioner said it never happened. But, well, who did Bob Kane pitch to? How did Jimmy Delsing get on base? Frank Saucier didn't bat. So finally, if you go look at 1952's records, he's back. You know, he's got a perfect stats, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the story. But these things are what started incensing baseball to force Bill Veeck to sell. But then the odd thing is, in 1959, he comes back and takes the White Sox to the World Series. So it's all these stories of Browns that people don't know. They're just so interesting. Whether it's Dizzy Dean coming out of the broadcast booth, or Pete Gray, the one-arm player.
Yeah, I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
That's unbelievable. He wasn't like Jim Abbott pitching. He was playing outfield and batting.
Yes. He was a league leader in the Sally League in 1944. And they again, as 45 seasons started, the world was still at war. A lot of the big stars were gone, and they were looking at him, and he was the MVP. So they gave him a tryout, but then it caused disruption in the clubhouse and animosity, and they actually started trading a few of the Brownies who wouldn't behave. And because a lot of people thought they were going to win the pennant again in 45, and they blamed Pete Gray. Now, the one thing I will say about Pete Gray, he was a model for so many people. In our film, we talk about a kid who, had kind of like the polio type thing, couldn't play a lot of sports, but you see Pete Gray, look what he can do. All these men who were wounded in World War II during this period, amputated an arm or leg, whatever. If this guy can make it to the majors, what an inspiration. The difference is that difference in pitching between minor league and major league is miles wide. And once they figured out how to give him a change of pace on a pitch where it's hard to come back with just one arm. But he was a good ball player. We can't take away that he was the MVP of the Sally League.
It's unbelievable that he could do that, to play in a position. I mean, I see how Jim Abbott pitched, but to play a position and bat, that's...
To play outfield, catch a ball, he had a special glove, which is in the Hall of Fame, that we, the fan club, helped preserve. You throw this glove up, catch the balls that came down and throw. You go out and try that tomorrow. That's the story. I mean, all these stories, that's the beauty of Browns baseball. All these stories.
And all of these stories you can find in Ed Wheatley's great books about the St. Louis Browns. Look them up and get these books in your collection immediately. Ed, I mean, favorite guest ever. I mean, just wrestling, baseball. We have to have you back on again. If you ever want to plug more books or anything, please feel free to join us.
Books, and maybe we'll come
I can't wait for that book.
Oh yeah, so whenever the Negro League book comes out, come back on, because we are very excited about that.
Once you get the wrestling books and want to talk more about wrestling, I think you'll want to talk more once you get them. Or we'll get the Browns book and we'll talk baseball stories anytime.
And I tell you what, on October 30th at the Halloween Spooktacular there, Herb's big event, I would like for you to sign my book.
I shall.
And I will be there. And speaking of which, one more time, Ed's latest book about wrestling at the Chase, all the classic stories of St. Louis wrestling. He's holding it up right there. You can pre-order the book right now at stlwrestlingbook.com, like many of us already have. Please pre-order the book. It is available everywhere. October 1st, just in a few weeks. Pre-order it now. Get it before anybody else can get their hands on it. One more time, Ed Wheatley, thank you so much for being on Turnbuckle Bros. Stick on with us here. Yeah. We're going to end the show, say goodbye to you. And at this time, for Ed Wheatley, for my brother Steve, this is Matt and the Turnbuckle Bros saying adios.